Okay, are we going? Yes. All right. Life or choice? This is my channel on the issue of abortion. So first, what is necessary to say? So the channel, basically, I want to get to the bottom of the issue of abortion. And that's what I want this channel to be. I want to understand abortion comprehensively. I want to understand every facet of it from both sides of the debate through this channel. And so the way I want to do that basically is I want to have conversations, have as many conversations as I can possibly have with people who disagree with anything that I have to say, even people who agree, whatever. I just want this to be a place where I can talk through the ideas that I have and hopefully just refine them really well. Then once I'm like an expert from both sides of the issue and really understand it thoroughly, then I think I will have a good understanding of if it's right or if it's even appropriate for me to share those ideas with anybody. Most people have an idea of this is right, and so I need what I think is right to happen. Therefore, hey, sir who disagrees with me, you're wrong, and I think this is right because X, Y, and Z. So let me cover a little bit of ground. I've written a few little notes that I do want to cover, but I want this video to be not an hour long. So let me cruise through it. So abortion, it's important just to realize abortion's not a political question and it's not a religious question. It's not a theological question in terms of I believe in such and such, theology or I'm a materialist or I'm a atheist or a Christian or a Muslim or whatever. It's not about that. It's based on any one of those. We can have a common philosophy based in a common ethic and reason and rationality. And so that's where the abortion conversation happens. It's not a political conversation because it's upstream from politics. Philosophy is always upstream from politics. So whatever philosophical idea you might have about something, whatever belief you have about something will become your value for such and such thing. And then politics is just your enactment of certain values that you hold to. So it's politics is downstream from philosophy. And so abortion, there's a lot of political questions where we agree on the same philosophy, but we don't know quite how to enact it politically. That's when an issue is on a political level. So maybe even like gun control would be a good one like that, where we all agree on the philosophy. We want less dead kids and we want people to have, freedom to do what they want to do. Less dead kids, less dead innocent people, whatever, all this stuff. Like we want people we all agree on the philosophy. Then we disagree on the politics. So I would say gun control, for the most part, there's philosophical aspects that need to be sorted out, but for the most part, it's probably more of a political question. Abortion is a mostly philosophical question. And so that's really interesting to me because I'm really interested in ideas, I am interested in politics too, but really interested in philosophy. And for the last few months, this has just been where I've been digging my feet into this one issue. And I kind of just said to myself a few months ago, actually what happened was we had this movie coming to town. We live in this tiny little town in British Columbia, this tiny little, local community. We had this movie coming to our movie theater called Unplanned. And apparently it was like really strong pro-life propaganda. And so the movie was coming to town and the people who run the nonprofit movie theater started getting death threats from people to say, don't show this movie here or they just somewhere or another, they threatened this person's family. And so they canceled the movie. And I was like, whoa, this has never happened as far as I know. Like nobody's ever had a movie canceled here. And it was for the issue of, it was because it was about abortion and because there's this super vitriolic, nasty, like aggressive disagreement about this issue. And that just made me like that. So that happened in July, I think maybe June or July. And that kind of made me just think, holy smokes, this is a really important question. And we are so divided on this right now. Like I would love to just understand it. I'd love to understand all these stupid arguments that people have back and forth, all these stupid, like, hey, no, my body, my choice. No, abortion is murder. All these like things that people think and say just off the cuff. They don't really understand the depth of their view, but they fight so loudly for it, which I think is great. Like, I have no problem with that. But looking at all that, I just thought like, man, I'd love to actually understand it. And so that's what I want to do here. And so for the last few months, that's basically been like the main thing I've been focused on. But a lot of the time, what I'm trying to say is a lot of the time, I have been just digging my feet in. Hey, if I can take half a year, and I want it to be a lot longer than that, but imagine if over the next 5 years, I just took half a year at a time to thoroughly understand one philosophical idea after the other. Well, in 5 years, I would have 10 different topics that I would understand, half a year's worth of study amount of understanding. And I thought that was awesome. So I figured I'd do that with abortion. That's basically what I've been doing. And along the way, this morning, I was just like, F this. I've been in the books and listening to stuff for so long. I need to start creating content and start having conversations about this, because I'm going to get to answers so much faster at this point. I think there's a lot of reading that you need to do to catch up to the common kind of philosophical debate that's happening right now. Anyway, the point is, like, there's this kind of popular conversation that happens, and it's kind of on a really simplistic level. And then there's this higher philosophical conversation. And so what I would love to do, I'd love to kind of merge the two almost. I'd love to put the higher philosophical conversation into a long-haired, bearded dude in his spare room, creating content on YouTube, where hopefully I can maybe engage people with a higher level of conversation. That sounds really arrogant to say, but I mean, that's basically what I want to do. I want myself and other people to have a higher level of discussion on the issue, and hopefully we can come to some sort of a conclusion, because either way you skin it, this is a serious moral issue. And so we need to friggin' figure this stuff out. So on YouTube, you might be able to find amazing conversations, but it's like at a podium or a debate stage or whatever, where people are giving really, really good philosophical arguments, but these videos have like 1,000, 5,000 views. And then you get videos from both sides that are viral and they have millions of views, and they're presenting the simple argument. So I don't care about how viral it becomes, but I hope that out of the kind of content creator realm of people, maybe things don't radically change in the next, say, 50 years. And 50 years from now, I could still be creating content like this online, and be one of the very early adopters of this forum that's only been around for a few years, since 2006, YouTube's been around, where we can now have long form conversation, and have it distributed to everybody. And so that was never possible before. So anyway, the point is, I hope to be kind of like a content creator who understands this issue pretty well. And my strategy is to have conversations. So actually this Sunday, I'm calling into the Atheist Experience, which is a YouTube channel that has confronted the issue of abortion quite a few times. And I'm just gonna call in, and hopefully I get through. And I'm going to challenge some ideas that they have that seem to be uninformed. And then on Monday, I'm going to do the same thing to Catholic Answers and call in to Trent Horn, who's doing an hour this Monday about asking people to call in and tell him why they're pro-choice. And so I'm going to call in and try and challenge some of his ideas. And these forums will be great. Hopefully I can record the conversations I have with both of these people. And that might bring a few eyeballs from either one of those channels, which I would love, because those are the type of channels where people are already really thinking through this stuff. And so they might be the type that are willing to have a conversation with me. My best strategy is to start engaging in online content about abortion. Always be open to changing my mind if the data or the logic lead me to change my mind. And this is one thing I do want to mention, even though it's kind of like abstract. I think that on some philosophical issues, only 10% of the battle is understanding the theory. 90% of it is practical. For example, I think that many people might have a strong opinion about climate change or being sexually faithful to their partner, but most of the battle is actually fought out in the realm of carrying out your beliefs in the practical. So you might have a really strong philosophical idea like, hey, I really think there's all these reasons. Like, here's a good example. Christians versus atheists and their faithfulness to their spouse. So Christians might have a better framework for a philosophy that says I should be faithful to my spouse, but in practicality, they don't really, statistically, they don't live it out even as much as atheists who might not have as strong of a philosophical idea of why they should be faithful. And so, some ideas are fought in the realm of practicality, like, hey, we all agree that being faithful is right, but now we have to figure out how to do that versus we're fighting against these like emotional draws or sexual draws or whatever it is, reasons not to carry out our philosophy. But abortion's different. Abortion statistically is very different. With abortion, pretty much the battle's decided in the philosophical round. It's more like 90% of the battle happens in the realm of ideas and opinions. And then 10% is, there might be people who don't carry out exactly what they believe. But for the most part, the battle is in the realm of ideas. And I think this is another reason why I'm really interested in having this conversation, is because a lot of other conversations, you might come to a conclusion, one conclusion or another. And that doesn't mean that you have some sort of a solution, or that doesn't mean if you could convince a culture or a populace to adopt that philosophy, that it would really have a significant change on their actions. But when it comes to abortion, it pretty much does. Like, statistically, abortion, here, I'll just read what I wrote. The data is so incredibly conclusive on this. People who are pro-life, that's individuals and groups, communities, even cultures, people who are pro-life do not have abortions, and people who are pro-choice have abortions. That's essentially, is a generalization, but that's essentially what the data shows. So what I'm saying is, on the issue of abortion, the cultural war is not about trying to change people's practical behavior. It's about trying to change people's opinion. It's 90% about theory. And if either side can get somebody to buy into their view, then they will act accordingly. And I think the reason for this is because having an abortion or not having an abortion, there are emotions tied to it, but there's no like biological like pull to do something that you don't believe in, the same way that there is with something like being unfaithful, where you might not believe that it's okay to be unfaithful or whatever, but you just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. Or you might not think it's okay to do a certain drug or whatever, but you keep doing it because you have this like biological pull to that thing. With abortion, it's not like that. It's an intellectual decision, and it's such a morally costly intellectual decision that you have to make. Anybody has to make, and I know that a lot of people make it with a lot of emotion, but it's a decision that people make in a more calculated way. And so I think that all I'm trying to say is like, I'm trying to predict why abortion would be so much more, the philosophy and the action be so much more congruent than most issues. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I wanted to read that. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm calling into the Atheist Experience on Sunday, calling in Catholic Answers on Monday. Hopefully I can post those. These are good places to call in because I'll actually be talking to people who have strong opinions and are trying to convince me of their ideas. Hopefully I can post these conversations and get some eyeballs on this channel. One last thing I want to say is that I realize, this is so true. I'm not any kind of eloquent speaker or anything like that. I realize that. Like, I may be slow in these conversations, especially with people like Matt Dillahunty at the Atheist Experience, who I should be talking to, Trent Horn at Catholic Answers. Like, these are really great speakers and just super intellectually rich people who have great opinions, who I'm honored to hopefully get to talk to. But like, I'm not going to be quick-witted and smart in that way. But I do know that I think through these things. I do consider and think through all these issues really deeply, and they matter to me a lot. So now to conclude, for full disclosure, and before, it's not really a conclusion quite yet. For full disclosure, before I can have any of these conversations and be convinced one way or another, let me explain what I believe about abortion right now. I'll define some terms as I go, but I'm not going to explain why I believe this. I'm just going to tell you what I believe. If I started to explain why I believe this, I would just be talking forever. So 6 points that I believe. Number 1, there are only 2 questions that need to be considered in regards to abortion: the personhood of the fetus and the bodily autonomy of the mother. Notice I didn't say we need to sort out when life begins. The individual life begins at conception. There is no disputing that. That's biological fact. Bodily autonomy just means the right to govern one's own body. Number 2, personhood cannot be a gradient over significant time. It must have a fixed point of beginning to which moral and legal law can be carried out accurately too. I know I said that and kind of wrote it wrong. But that's not that important. I can talk more about that in the future. I'd love to have somebody who thinks that personhood can be a gradient, like a light switch, a gradual light switch from dim to bright, and they think that personhood could represent from 0 to 100. I would like to talk to you, because actually personhood, the most basic rights have to be given at when 0 turns to 1. This is what I think anyway. But I'm trying to say these points without getting into all of my reasoning. Number 3, and I already kind of mentioned this, the most reasonable and ethical point to begin considering a human life as a person is at conception. So this is, I'm not supposed to be explaining my views. I'm supposed to leave it a mystery. Pretty much, I think the substantive view of personhood is the most compelling. I think probably 4 of the 5 most compelling moral philosophies for personhood put personhood beginning at between fertilization and conception. And then I would say one of the 5, which is basically based on desires, if anybody cares. I would say that's a pretty, it's not a terrible argument. So that's my number 3. The most reasonable and ethical point to begin considering a human being a person is at conception. Number 4, bodily autonomy does not give the right to end pregnancy in any case that sex was consensual. Man, I just want to talk at length about these. This is where David Boonin writes like a madman. He tries to make this case and he fails. In my opinion, I think Francis Beckwith writes an amazing article in response to his book in 2002. I think Beckwith writes his book in 2007? But he writes an article in 2006 maybe. Anyway, I can, if anybody cares, just message me and I'll send you the link. But the point is, Boonin is like, he tries to argue this so strong. And so originally, probably the first big proponent of this was the famous violinist with Judith Jarvis Thompson in 1971. That kind of died off. There's so many objections to that analogy. Boonin comes out in 2002 and updates the thing. And does so pretty well, but not adequate, not good enough. And so essentially, I believe that if you voluntarily act in a way that's naturally ordered to another person being dependent upon you, then you are obligated to get them to safety. So if I voluntarily choose to take my toddler out to a cabin in the middle of the woods, I have an obligation that I cannot abandon him at that point. I need to get him to safety. Even if I want to abandon him, I need to at least get him to like a police station. So that's, yeah, I feel like that's a good enough way of saying that. Any case that sex was consensual. But number 5, bodily autonomy does give the right to end pregnancy via, not via killing, but via letting die in the case of rape. And number 6, doesn't really have to do with abortion itself. It's more about how to bring abortion numbers down, which is something that many people on both sides agree upon. I haven't read this since I wrote it early this morning, but number 6, the most effective way to cut abortion numbers would be 1, personally take responsibility for the kids in foster care and who already need adoption. 2, educate everybody we can on sexual health and abortion. 3, promote legal change to make it illegal to perform abortions. So basically, at the moment, I've come to believe that from the time a new human life starts, we need to consider that human being as a person and protect them. But if the mother did not consent to the act of sex, which brought about this conceived human life, which is dependent upon her, if she was raped, she has the right to let that embryo die. I could talk for hours explaining why I've come to these exact conclusions, but that's what all my future videos are for. But if you disagree with what I have to say, please reach out to the email address below and we can set up a Skype. I will not engage in any of the keyboard warrior comment section or emailing back and forth nonsense. If you're too scared to show your face, your opinion is not worth listening to. If you're willing to Skype and talk about it, then your opinion is worth my time, and I will be honored to hear from you. So there it is. That's my first episode. Longer than I was expecting. And that just explains basically what I want this series to be. So that's where I'm at right now. I want this series to be my development of these ideas. You can watch as I change my opinions. I guarantee that I'll change my opinions as I go. This is where I'm at right now. I hope that you can come on and talk to me and explain why I'm wrong.